My name is Evelyn Hart, 38 years old. The champagne flute slipped from my fingers and exploded against the kitchen's marble tile, a burst of glittering shrapnel that rang through the empty house like a warning bell. The sound was loud, but not louder than the pulse in my ears or the small, illuminated betrayal in my hand. Can't wait to sail away with you tomorrow, my love. Room 247, our little secret paradise. 23 words that reduce 12 years of marriage to a cracked screen and a spreading stain of champagne. I sank to my knees, silk clinging to my legs as the cold fizz crept into the fabric, sweet and sour. 30 minutes earlier, I'd been dancing around the same island, toasting my husband's big win, humming, while I set out dessert plates. I had even ironed the ribbon on the gift I planned to hide in his luggage, something playful, something celebratory. I had helped him pack. My hands had folded his shirts. Those same hands now trembled. The phone buzzed again. Hey, honey, just boarding now. The ship is incredible. Wish you could see it. Love you. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. Fingers that had texted a secret paradise to her, Glenda, typed love to me without even pausing to feel the difference. I stood, one palm on the counter to steady myself, and looked down the hallway at the framed photos we curated over a decade. Frozen smiles stared back like props from a stage set. Engagement on the Brooklyn Bridge. The first Christmas in this house on Willowbrook Lane. Clayton in a navy suit at his firm's gala, my head tilted against his shoulder. For years, I'd taken comfort in those preserved moments. Tonight, the frames felt like evidence in a case I didn't know I'd been trying. In the stainless steel reflection of the fridge, I saw a woman I almost didn't recognize, mascara feathered into gray shadows, hair loosened from a neat chignon, green eyes glassy and alert in a way that felt new. Hurt, yes, but something else too. Cold air moved through me, a clear channel cutting through static. I straightened. His laptop was open in the home office, as it often was after he checked final emails. In 12 years, I had never violated his privacy. Trust had been our religion. It died the moment my thumb brushed the trackpad. History first. Cruises. Hotel packages in Miami. A restaurant for two under fake names in a city I had never visited with him. Then folders, nested and misnamed, project files, Q4 renderings, a harmless architecture of deceit that opened into photos he'd buried, a stunning brunette with a law firm smile, Clayton's hand at her waist, the kind of kiss that takes practice. Glenda. I knew the face. She'd hovered at a Christmas party last year, a little too amused by his jokes. Her last name arrived with a cold click. Chambers. A partner at the firm that handled his company's legal work. Married. 2 children. And a husband. Dr. Alexander Chambers, cardiac surgeon. Mount Sinai. A quick search yielded Park Avenue Glass, a slate of philanthropic dinners, a public biography full of good deeds. Perfect, I thought, because cruelty wears jewelry as easily as warmth does. I don't romanticize suffering. I just recognize the cost of pretending. I moved with a calm that did not feel like me. Screenshots into a folder, a tidy PDF of the cruise booking, the itinerary, celestial dream, 7 days, leaving from Miami tomorrow at 6 p.m., a tab for the law firm calendar, another for medical conferences. When the schedule loaded, I felt the smallest, darkest click of a lock turning. Meridian Medical Conference, Miami. Same dates as the cruise. Alexander would be in the same city, maybe the same hotel. Fate, or just the predictable carelessness of people who believe they are smarter than consequence. In the kitchen again, I swept glass into the dustpan with small, efficient strokes. The house smelled like citrus cleaner and a life I had outgrown. The clock above the range slid toward midnight. For a moment I thought of calling someone, my sister, whose advice arrives blunt and useful. My old mentor from the agency I left when Clayton's hours turned punishing, and my support became a job in itself. But I didn't want witnesses. Not yet. Not until I knew what I intended to do with what I knew. 12 years is a long time to build a home out of one person's ambitions. I had arranged my days around his calendar, made a ritual of exactly 6:30 dinners, remembered every associate's spouse's name. curated rooms that photographed well because clients walked through them. It hadn't felt like loss then. It felt like partnership, choice. I can admit now that a part of me liked being the still point around which his world spun. It made me important. It also made me invisible. The second phone, the one he never hid because secrets are safest in plain sight, vibrated against the marble again. I let it ring out. I placed it carefully on a folded dish towel as if the courtesy mattered to anyone but me. Back in the office, I printed what I needed. The printer's warm paper stacked into a precise, undeniable pile. Cruise confirmation number, cabin assignment, dinner seating request, payment receipts. I tucked the pages into a manila folder and slid a paperclip across the top with a click that steadied me. There is a point in grief where it becomes a plan. Mine did not feel noble. It felt necessary. I opened a new tab and typed slowly. Meridian Hospital Cardiology Department. A directory appeared. I noted an office number, a receptionist's name, visiting hours. Then I searched the hotel Clayton preferred in Miami for client entertaining. Fully booked. Of course, I checked 3 others. The third took my corporate card without a murmur. A corner suite, ocean view. When the confirmation email landed, I felt an absurd, bright flash of satisfaction, the kind you get when a puzzle piece finally locks into place. I changed out of the ruined dress and into dark jeans, a navy sweater, flats I could run in. At the mirror, I wiped away the smeared mascara and applied a fresh, restrained line. The trick to speaking with doctors is to look worried, in a way that signals you will not waste their time. The trick to speaking with receptionists is to be kind and specific. I have always been good at details. I have always made people comfortable. That skill is not inherently virtuous. It can be a weapon. When I closed the suitcase, the zipper sound felt like drawing a boundary. I walked the length of the hallway one more time, letting the photos look at me. We had been beautiful once. Young, certain, a little smug. We were the kind of couple friends envied because we made division of labor look elegant. I had believed that meant we were strong. I understand now it meant we were practiced. At the front door, I hesitated, not because I doubted leaving, but because leaving always asks for a ritual. I took my wedding ring off and set it in the small ceramic dish where we keep keys. It made the faintest sound. I waited to feel ruined. Instead, I felt awake. In the car, the house shrinking in the rear view, I rehearsed what I would say to Dr. Chambers. I would be simple and precise. My name is Evelyn Hart. I believe your wife is on a cruise with my husband tomorrow. I will show him the folder. I will not embellish. I will ask him what he wants to do, and if what he wants is to pretend, I will proceed alone. Halfway to the airport, the phone lit up with Clayton's name. Voicemail. The preview line said, "Don't be mad. It's just a work thing." I let the message finish without listening. I already knew the script. Charm, apology, shaped like explanation, a promise to make it up to me with reservations at the place I'd mentioned once, and he'd filed away as proof of attentiveness. He would say he loved me. He would believe he meant it. Maybe, in his way, he would. At a red light, a memory surfaced unbidden. Last October, a quiet morning, when he'd left for a meeting before dawn and returned with peonies because he'd Googled October 15th birth flower while waiting for an elevator. He'd set them on the counter with a kiss and a happy birthday, baby, and I'd laughed because it was the 14th. We ate takeout that night and pretended we both hadn't noticed. The light turned green. The city opened in front of me, its midnight arteries lit and empty. I felt, oddly, like I was stepping into a version of myself I had abandoned years ago, the woman who could walk into a room and persuade, who could turn chaos into strategy, who could pick up the phone and find the person who had the key. 12 years of being the steady one had not erased her. She had only been sleeping. At the terminal curb, I killed the engine and listened to the quiet before movement. Wheels rattled on concrete as I lifted the suitcase from the trunk. I looked up at the departures board. Miami flights marched in orderly lines across the screen. Tomorrow at 6, a ship would leave a port with my husband on it. Tonight, I would find the other spouse in this equation and place the truth between us like a scalpel. Sharp, clean, capable of harm, capable, maybe, of healing if guided by steady hands. Inside, the automatic doors sighed open and cold air rushed my face. I pulled the folder from my tote, checked the paperclip, and walked toward check-in with a calm that felt like the beginning of something irreversible. The plan wasn't finished yet, not in its details, but the shape was set. Find Alexander, show him what I knew, decide together whether to let them enjoy their secret in peace or to meet them in the bright, polished dining room of a ship where secrets look like reflections and truth rings like glass on tile. I did not know then which choice I would make. I only knew I was done being the one who never chose. My suitcase rolled across the glossy tile of the Miami terminal, wheels rattling over the occasional crack, but my mind was already at the hospital. Meridian. I had repeated the name so many times on the plane that it felt like an incantation, a password to something dangerous. The flight had been a blur of coffee, phone glow, and the folder on my lap. I kept opening it, checking the dates, the cabin confirmation, as if the paper might morph while I blinked. But it stayed steady, immutable, like the betrayal itself. Meridian Hospital rose pale against the Florida heat, all glass panes and disciplined landscaping. It had that strange aura hospitals always carry, sterile but also human, buzzing with the machinery of life and death. I had dressed with care for this errand. Navy dress, flats, hair pulled back, makeup pared down to something that whispered tired wife, rather than furious detective. Vulnerability was the easiest mask to wear when fury threatened to consume you. The receptionist was brisk, polite. "Do you have an appointment with Dr. Chambers?" "No," I said, lowering my voice, letting it break on the edges. "But it's urgent, personal." I slid a small card across the desk, my old marketing executive card, the one I hadn't used in years, but still carried. People respected a title. They trusted the professional. "Please, tell him it's about his wife." That word, wife, did the work. 10 minutes later, I was being ushered down a muted hallway lined with plaques and medical honors. My breath slowed, though my heart hadn't gotten the memo. The nurse knocked, a door swung inward, and there he was, Alexander Chambers. He looked exactly as I had imagined from pictures, which was unsettling. Tall, salt and pepper hair, wire-rimmed glasses, posture straightened by years of surgeries. A man who lived in control. A man who, like me, had no idea until recently that his life was a set piece built on lies. He glanced up, polite confusion in his eyes. "Yes, can I help you?" I stepped inside, clutching the folder like it might burn me. "My name is Evelyn Hart," I said, voice steady, even as my stomach tightened. "I believe you know my husband. Clayton Hart. He works with your wife, Glenda." Recognition flickered, then confusion again. "Of course. I've met him briefly. Is something wrong?" Something wrong. The understatement nearly made me laugh. Instead, I let my voice tremble just enough. "I wish I were here for something simple, Dr. Chambers, but I need to show you something, and I need you to brace yourself." He gestured for me to sit. His office was lined with photos, family vacations, a smiling teenage girl with braces, a younger boy in a soccer uniform, Glenda at a charity gala, champagne flute in hand. The irony stabbed, sharp and cruel. I set the folder on his desk and opened it, slowly, like unwrapping a weapon. "I found this last night," I said, sliding the first set of papers forward. "Clayton told me he was on a business trip this week, a cruise for networking." My throat tightened, but I pressed forward. But when I checked, I saw Glenda had also requested time off. Same dates, same destination. He frowned, brows knitting, but the color was already draining from his face. "She told me she'd be in Chicago. A conference." His voice caught. He broke off. His hand hovered over the papers like he wanted to touch them, but feared contamination. "I thought maybe it was coincidence," I continued softly. But then I found the photos. I pushed the folder farther across the desk. Hotel reservations, screenshots, a handful of prints from Clayton's hidden files, Clayton and Glenda at a restaurant, their hands linked across white linen. The kiss in the hotel hallway. Not explicit, but damning. I had chosen the balance carefully, enough to convince, not enough to humiliate beyond bearing. He looked at them like a doctor studying x-rays, the practiced detachment fraying at the edges. His jaw tightened, his throat worked, and when he finally spoke, his voice was low and dangerous. How long? Months, at least, I said. Maybe longer. I don't know. But I know this. They're boarding the Celestial Dream tomorrow at 6. Cabin 247. They think they're clever. They think they've earned a secret. I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. But secrets rot, and sooner or later the rot shows. For a long moment, the only sound was the muted tick of the wall clock. He stared at the folder, then at me, then back at the smiling photos of his family on the shelf. His hands trembled once, barely visible, before he folded them deliberately on the desk. Control. He was trying to summon it back. "What do we do?" he asked finally. The simplest question and the most complicated. I hadn't expected him to ask me. I had expected anger, denial, dismissal. Instead, there was an opening. A door where I had thought I'd find a wall. I let the silence stretch a beat before answering. That depends on what you can live with. You can ignore it, pretend. Many people do. Or, I hesitated, hearing the steel in my own voice, we can show them what it feels like to be exposed. His eyes sharpened. Exposed? You mean confront them? Not just confront. I closed the folder, the paperclip snapping tight. Surprise them, on the ship, in public. They think they're untouchable, wrapped in their fantasy. Imagine their faces when they see us, when they realize it's over, not hidden anymore, truth on display. He stood and walked to the window, shoulders taut, staring out at the Miami skyline. His reflection was pale, tired, older in the glass. That sounds like revenge. It is, I said, refusing to flinch. They've made us the supporting characters in their little romance. I don't intend to play along. Do you? He turned back, and for the first time since I'd walked in, his gaze met mine with something beyond confusion. A cold, sharp spark. Not agreement yet, but possibility. He sat again, exhaling slowly. You realize what you're suggesting. This isn't a movie. This is our lives, our children's lives. I know, I said quietly. That's why I'm here, because pretending hurts worse in the long run. They need to know that what they've done has consequences, and we need to know we didn't let them walk away laughing. His silence stretched, heavy. He picked up a photo from his desk, his daughter in her debate uniform, smiling, confident, and set it back down. Finally he spoke. How would we even get on the ship? Cruises book months in advance. I have connections, I said. I worked in marketing before Clayton's career became my job. I know people, and cruise lines like money more than scandal. A quiet buyout of a canceled cabin? Easier than dealing with headlines about infidelity on a luxury liner. He almost smiled, not amusement, but something bitter. You've thought this through. I met his gaze. All night, we sat in silence, two strangers linked by betrayal. He rubbed his temple, then shook his head once. If we do this, it's not for spectacle, it's not for gossip. It's for truth, for showing them what they've broken. Agreed, I said. We don't need to scream. We just need to exist in their space. Let them feel it. He reached for the folder again, slid it closer, and closed it with steady fingers. When do we leave? Relief, sharp and cold, rushed through me. Not triumph, not yet. Just confirmation that I wasn't insane for wanting this. Tomorrow, I said. 2 p.m. flight. They board at 6. We'll already be waiting. He leaned back in his chair, eyes closing briefly. When he opened them again, something had shifted. He wasn't just a surgeon or a husband anymore. He was a man with a wound no scalpel could fix. A man who had chosen not to look away. I gathered the folder, tucking it into my tote. As I stood, he asked quietly, Evelyn, what if this doesn't make us feel better? I paused at the door. Then at least we'll know. Sometimes knowing is the only power we get. The corridor outside was bright, buzzing with life, but all I felt was the gravity of what I had set in motion. Tomorrow the ship would sail, and we would be on it. Not as passengers seeking rest, but as witnesses dragging the truth into the light. The Miami air hit like a furnace when we stepped out of the cab. Heat pressed into my skin, sticky and relentless, a wall of humidity that seemed to mock the icy composure I was trying to maintain. Beside me, Alexander adjusted his glasses, his suit jacket already wilting in the afternoon sun. We were two strangers bound by a single truth, carrying a secret heavier than our luggage. The Fontainebleau Hotel loomed above us, all glass and oceanfront glamour, a place designed for indulgence. Clayton had once promised to bring me here, said we'd celebrate an anniversary with cocktails by the pool. Another unkept vow, one I had forgotten until the building's white curves stood over me like an accusation. Now I was checking in, not as his wife, but as Alexander's, at least on paper. The concierge smiled with professional warmth. "Welcome, Dr. and Mrs. Chambers. Your suite is ready." Mrs. Chambers. The words sliced, but I let them pass over me without flinching. This was the first rehearsal. If I couldn't wear the title here, among strangers, how could I wear it tomorrow on a ship filled with witnesses? Our suite was a shrine to excess. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows spilling turquoise ocean into the room, a bathroom larger than my first apartment. Alexander set his briefcase on the glass desk, his movements precise, controlled, as though he were scrubbing in for surgery. I stood at the window, staring out at the horizon where the cruise ships rested like floating cities. One of them was the Celestial Dream. Tomorrow, Clayton would step onto it, believing he was invisible. Tomorrow, we would prove otherwise. Alexander's voice broke the silence. "We should talk about boundaries." He removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes. "If we're going to pretend, we need to agree on what that means." I turned from the window. "You mean touching? Public gestures?" "Yes, enough to look convincing. Not so much that it confuses us." His tone faltered on the last phrase. The honesty of it caught me off guard. He wasn't only worried about appearances. He was worried about what might happen if the line between performance and truth blurred. I walked closer, slow steps across the marble, until I stood a few feet away. "Alexander, this is theater. Nothing more. We're here to make them doubt, to make them see themselves, that's all." His gaze met mine, steady, searching. "You're certain you can keep it that way?" I almost said yes, without hesitation. But the memory of his trembling hands on the folder yesterday, his quiet fury, his grief, it lived in me now. We were allies forged in betrayal. That bond was dangerous. "I'm certain enough," I said finally. He nodded, satisfied for the moment, and pulled a packet from his briefcase. The cruise itinerary. "They board tomorrow at 2. We'll wait until 4:30. By then they'll be settled, convinced they're safe. We appear at dinner." "Not confront," I reminded him. "Exist." He gave a small, humorless smile. "Exist loudly, then." We spread the papers across the coffee table, marking times, events. The captain's formal dinner on night 4. A masquerade ball on night 6. The pool deck activities. Places where appearances mattered, where couples displayed themselves like ornaments. "These are our stages," I said, circling them with a pen. "These are where we remind them they're not untouchable." Hours passed in murmured strategy, the ocean outside shifting from turquoise to indigo as the sun sank. At one point, Alexander ordered dinner to the suite. Stone crab, key lime pie, a bottle of wine neither of us touched. We ate like soldiers before battle, appetite muted by nerves. Later, alone in the bedroom, I stood before the mirror with the dress I had chosen for the captain's dinner. Midnight blue silk, my grandmother's diamond necklace. I draped it across my body, imagining Clayton's face when he saw me in it, not across a candlelit table as his wife, but on the arm of another man. My lips curved into a smile I didn't recognize. Cold, certain, dangerous. Sleep was elusive. The suite was silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning, but inside my chest, storms gathered. I thought of Clayton, probably laughing with Glenda over champagne, secure in the belief that his lies were airtight. I thought of Glenda's children, who had no idea their mother was rewriting their family. I thought of Alexander's daughter and son, their faces smiling from the photographs in his office. Collateral damage. None of this was fair to them. But fairness had left the room the moment Clayton sent that text. At 2 a.m., unable to rest, I padded barefoot into the living room. Alexander was there, sitting on the sofa in the dark, his posture rigid, eyes on the ocean. He looked up, startled but not embarrassed. "Couldn't sleep?" "No," I said, folding my arms around myself. "You?" He shook his head. Every time I close my eyes, I see her face. I wonder what lies she'll tell when I confront her, and I wonder if part of me will want to believe it. I sat across from him, the low table between us littered with papers. You're not alone in that. Part of me still wants Clayton to look at me and say it was all a mistake, that I'm enough. The words cracked as they left me, raw and humiliating. But they were true. His voice softened. That's the cruelty of betrayal. It makes you question your own worth, not just their choices. We sat in silence, bound by that truth. Finally, he leaned forward. Evelyn, whatever happens tomorrow, we have to remember something. This isn't about destroying them. It's about reclaiming ourselves. I nodded, though my heart still whispered darker things. Revenge, exposure, humiliation. Perhaps I wasn't noble enough to separate them. But I could let him believe it, maybe even let myself believe it, for now. Dawn crept in, pale and humid, smearing light across the ocean. We dressed in quiet efficiency, each of us retreating into roles. He in khakis and a polo, the casual armor of a husband on vacation, me in a white sundress, sunglasses, hair loose. We looked the part. A couple seeking reconnection after hardship. No one would question us. At the port, the celestial dream rose like a floating palace, all gleaming white decks and banners, promising luxury. Families clustered in lines, honeymooners clutched hands, retirees laughed over matching shirts. We wheeled our luggage forward, past security, past smiling attendants who scanned our forged reservations without a blink. Money and connections had smoothed the way, just as I promised. The air changed as soon as we stepped on board. Salt, sun, and the faint scent of polished brass. A string quartet played near the grand staircase, welcoming passengers with elegance. I felt my spine straighten, my chin lift. We were no longer planning. We were inside the story. As we walked toward our cabin, I caught sight of a familiar profile across the atrium. Clayton. His arm draped casually around Glenda's waist, her laughter rising like glass chimes. They hadn't seen us. Not yet. But the sound of her laugh clawed at my skin, too familiar, too triumphant. I touched Alexander's arm lightly, a signal rather than affection. Not now, I whispered. Let them settle. He gave a single, sharp nod. Together we turned toward the elevators, their laughter echoing in the vast space. The first act of our theater had begun. In our cabin, once the door closed, I exhaled hard enough to tremble. Alexander leaned against the wall, pale but resolute. They're here. Yes, I said, my pulse still racing, and so are we. I went to the balcony, staring out at the horizon. The ship hadn't even left port, but already the game was in motion. Tomorrow, we would dine in their line of sight. Tomorrow, we would let them feel the weight of being watched, of being known. For now, the suspense itself was a kind of victory. As the horn of the celestial dream blared across the harbor, signaling departure, I realized something else. I wasn't afraid anymore. For the first time in years, I felt alive. The second morning at sea dawned cloudless, the horizon a flawless curve of blue that should have promised serenity. Instead, it felt like the stage curtain rising on an act we had rehearsed in whispers and restless nights. Today was a sea day, which meant every passenger would be on board. No distractions, no excursions. The perfect theater. I chose my armor carefully. A white bikini, elegant rather than revealing, paired with a wide-brimmed hat and a silk wrap that drifted around my legs like smoke. Confidence was its own costume. Clayton had always preferred me understated, modest, his wife as an accessory rather than a presence. Today, I wanted to be undeniable. Alexander emerged from the bedroom in navy swim trunks and a linen shirt, his skin already bronzed by the Florida sun. He wasn't flashy, but there was something about the quiet strength of him, the way he carried himself with dignity, that drew eyes without asking for them. I saw it immediately. A pair of young women at the elevator glanced at him, then at me, curiosity flickering in their faces. Let them wonder. On the pool deck, we chose 2 loungers in the center, prime visibility. I stretched out on mine, letting the sun glaze my skin, while Alexander ordered us drinks. He returned with 2 mojitos, condensation dripping down the glasses, and handed one to me with a small, conspiratorial smile. To theater, he said softly. To truth, I corrected, clinking my glass against his. We sipped, we laughed, we leaned toward each other in ways that were just shy of intimate. To anyone watching, we were a couple rediscovering each other. The illusion was seamless, until it wasn't. I felt them before I saw them. A ripple of attention, a shift in air. Clayton and Glenda entered the deck 15 minutes later, towels over shoulders, sunglasses masking expressions. They scanned the crowd, and then they saw us. I didn't need to look directly to know. The weight of their gaze was tangible, heavy. They chose loungers on the opposite side, but their laughter was too loud, their gestures too exaggerated. Performance answering performance. Ready? Alexander murmured, leaning close enough that his breath brushed my ear. Always, I said, and tipped my head back in laughter at something he hadn't said, the sound ringing high and clear across the pool. Minutes later, I stood and handed him sunscreen. Will you? I asked, deliberately loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. He nodded, hand steady as he smoothed lotion across my shoulders, his touch careful, but lingering just long enough to imply familiarity. My skin burned, not from the sun, but from the intimacy of it. For a moment, I forgot this was staged. For a moment, it felt real. We swam together, splashing lightly, playing like teenagers. I let him lift me, my arms circling his neck, my laughter bubbling as though I had nothing to lose. Around us, the pool buzzed with vacationers, but all I felt was the singular focus of two pairs of eyes watching from across the deck. I wanted them to see. I wanted them to choke on it. When we returned to our loungers, dripping and breathless, a shadow fell over me. Glenda. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, despite the humidity, her red bikini calculated to command attention. She leaned on the edge of my chair, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Having fun? She asked sweetly. I tilted my sunglasses down, meeting her gaze with lazy calm. A wonderful time. The water's perfect. I'm sure it is, she said, her eyes narrowing. You know, Clayton always said you were predictable. The barb hit its mark, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of flinching. I sat up, smoothing my wrap, and replied evenly, People change. Sometimes they even surprise themselves. Her smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before returning, brittle and bright. Is that what this is? A surprise performance? I let the silence stretch, then answered softly, No, this is me. Finally. Before she could respond, Alexander's voice cut through the tension. Glenda. He had approached quietly, towel slung over his shoulder, droplets still tracing down his chest. He stopped beside me, his presence grounding. I didn't see you there. Her smile crumbled, replaced by something raw. Alex. Her voice cracked, and for the first time, I saw panic flicker in her eyes. You look good. Thank you, he said politely, but his tone was distant, clinical, the way a surgeon might speak to a stranger. Enjoy your vacation. He turned slightly, his body angling toward me, and placed his hand lightly on the small of my back. The gesture was subtle, protective, but it was enough. Glenda's composure wavered, anger flashing to cover fear. You're making a spectacle of yourself, she hissed. I smiled, unbothered. I'm just living my life, Glenda. If you find it unsettling, perhaps that says more about you than about me. Her mouth opened to retort, but Clayton appeared then, crossing the deck with hurried steps. He looked worse than I had ever seen him. Unshaven, hair askew, eyes ringed with sleeplessness. He stopped a few feet from us, chest heaving as though he had run. Evelyn, he said, voice raw. We need to talk, now. I rose slowly, wrapping my towel around me, and met his gaze. For a fleeting second, I saw the man I had once loved, the young architect with too many ideas and not enough money, who used to sketch floor plans on napkins over late-night pizza. But that man had died in the shadows of deception. All that stood before me now was a liar scrambling to contain the fallout of his own choices. No, I said simply, we don't. Please, he begged, lowering his voice. This isn't what it looks like. I laughed then, a sharp, humorless sound. Clayton, it looks like you're on a romantic cruise with another man's wife. What exactly should it look like? He faltered, words collapsing in his throat. His desperation clawed at me, but it was too late, too little, too false. You don't understand, he whispered. Oh, I understand perfectly. I tightened the towel around me, drawing a line he could not cross. You're not upset because you hurt me. You're upset because you got caught. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Around us, the noise of the pool continued, children splashing, waiters calling orders, but in our circle there was nothing but the sound of endings. Clayton's face crumpled, his bravado gone. For a moment he looked older than his years, broken in a way that stirred pity where anger had lived. But pity is not the same as forgiveness. I turned away, placing my hand lightly on Alexander's arm. We have plans, I said over my shoulder. Excuse us. As we walked away, I heard Glenda's voice, sharp and desperate, hissing at Clayton. Do something. They're making us look like fools. But he didn't answer. He just stood there, watching me leave with another man, the weight of realization finally bending his spine. Back in our cabin, I peeled off the damp swimsuit, my body still trembling, not from the cold, but from adrenaline. Alexander handed me a glass of water, his expression unreadable. That was brutal, he said quietly. It was necessary, I replied, though the words felt like armor I wasn't sure I still needed. My chest ached, my throat burned. Anger, grief, triumph, they tangled until I couldn't separate them. For a long moment we sat in silence, the ship humming beneath us. Then he reached out, brushing a strand of wet hair from my face. His touch was gentle, uncalculated. Not part of the performance. Something else. Something real. I should have pulled back. I didn't. The announcement for the captain's formal dinner echoed through the ship like a summons. Guests poured from their cabins, dressed in black tie and silk, the air tinged with perfume and anticipation. It was the night everyone remembered from brochures, the night of chandeliers, champagne towers, and photographs worthy of frames. For us, it was a stage, and I had chosen my costume with ruthless care. The midnight blue gown hugged every line of my body, flowing into a sweep of fabric that caught the light like water. Around my neck gleamed my grandmother's diamond necklace, a relic of women who had endured much and spoken little. Tonight I intended to speak without words. Alexander, in a black tuxedo that sharpened every edge of his posture, offered his arm. He had the kind of quiet elegance that made the uniform of formality look like it belonged to him. Together, we were a tableau of composed intimacy. The dining room glittered with chandeliers and polished cutlery. Servers in crisp uniforms floated between tables with practiced grace. Our assigned seats placed us near the center, close enough to see and be seen. I had arranged that with a discreet tip to the maitre d'. Appearances were currency. I intended to spend generously. When Clayton and Glenda entered, 20 minutes after us, the shift in air was palpable. They hesitated, scanning the room, and their eyes landed on us. Glenda's red gown was bold, daring, the kind of color that demanded attention. Clayton's tuxedo fit, but poorly. His posture betrayed fatigue. They looked like a couple playing dress-up, brittle at the edges. Across the table, Alexander leaned slightly closer to me and murmured, "They look miserable." "They should," I whispered back, keeping my smile serene. Their little paradise is cracking. The courses arrived in a parade. Lobster bisque, seared scallops, filet mignon. I touched Alexander's hand across the table, fed him a bite of dessert from my fork, laughed softly at something he said. Each gesture was deliberate, calculated to slice through Clayton's composure. I could feel his gaze like heat on the back of my neck. Every smile between Alexander and me seemed to wound him further. But the dinner wasn't the climax. That came when Glenda excused herself, her chair scraping softly against the marble floor. I waited a few minutes, then rose as well, my heels clicking a counterpoint to the string quartet's waltz. The ladies' room was a sanctuary of marble and gold fixtures, softly lit to flatter. I found her there, not at the mirror, but collapsed into a chair in the lounge area, her head in her hands. "Rough evening?" I asked casually, pulling out my lipstick. I applied it slowly, watching her through the mirror. Her head jerked up, eyes rimmed red despite the flawless mask of makeup. "What do you want, Evelyn?" Her voice was brittle, ragged. "Nothing from you," I replied evenly. "I already have everything I need." Her laugh was hollow. "You think you're clever showing up here with my husband, making a fool of me." I capped the lipstick with a click and turned, meeting her eyes directly. "I'm not making a fool of you, Glenda. You did that yourself the moment you decided to sleep with mine." Her jaw clenched, her hands curling into fists in her lap. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said, stepping closer. You thought you could have it all, the perfect family, the career, and the affair as garnish. You thought you were smarter than everyone else. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back with fury. I love him, she said desperately. I love Clayton, and he loves me. What we have is real. Then why are you here crying in a bathroom? My voice was low, steady. If your love is so real, why does it crumble the second someone sees it? She flinched as though struck. For a moment, I saw the woman beneath the armor, terrified, cornered, suddenly unsure. She rose, squaring her shoulders. Stay away from my husband. I smiled, genuine amusement bubbling to the surface. Or what? You'll tell him this is a performance? Go ahead, tell him. But ask yourself this, what if it isn't an act anymore? What if Alexander and I have found something real, something stronger than your fantasy? Her face drained of color, and in that instant I knew she understood. The affair she had built her world around was paper thin, and mine, whether born of vengeance or not, had roots now. I left her standing before the mirror, staring at her reflection like it was a stranger. Back at the table, dessert had arrived. Alexander looked up as I returned, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes searched mine. Everything all right? He asked quietly. Perfect, I said, placing my hand over his on the table. The gesture was small, but the effect was seismic. Across the room, Clayton flinched as though the touch had cut him. After dinner, the orchestra lured guests into the ballroom. Couples glided across polished floors under chandeliers that refracted light like diamonds. Alexander extended his hand. Dance with me? I hesitated only a breath before taking it. His palm was warm, steady, the weight of his touch grounding me. We stepped into the tide of dancers, moving with a rhythm that felt improbably natural. As we swayed, he leaned close. Evelyn, there's something I need to tell you. What? My chest tightened at the seriousness in his voice. This morning, while you were getting ready, I called my lawyer. I faltered, looking up into his face. About the divorce? He nodded. I can't go back. I can't look at her every day knowing what she's capable of. My children deserve a father who doesn't live in lies. The words landed like stones, heavy but solid. He wasn't bluffing. This wasn't theater for him anymore. It wasn't entirely theater for me either. I should have been unsettled by the speed of it, by the recklessness of decisions made in days, but instead I felt a clarity I hadn't known in years. You're certain? I whispered. He met my eyes. I've never been more certain. The music slowed, the dancers around us blurring into shadows. I felt his arm tighten around my waist, his breath warm at my temple. For a moment, the revenge, the plan, the entire ship vanished. There was only us. Then, from the edge of the dance floor, a figure loomed. Clayton. His face pale, strained, his eyes burning with something between desperation and regret, watching us. Alone, while his mistress sat abandoned at their table. His anguish was naked, raw, and it cut through me in a way I hadn't anticipated. I had wanted him broken. I had wanted him to feel what I felt. Now that he did, all I felt was pity. Alexander spun me gently, bringing me back into his arms. Is this enough? He murmured. I stared at Clayton, his expression crumbling, and whispered, I thought it would be. But now, revenge feels overrated. When the song ended, Alexander didn't let go immediately. His eyes searched mine, full of a question neither of us spoke aloud. What happens after this? I didn't know. But I knew one thing. Whatever tomorrow brought, it would not be silence, not be invisibility. Outside, the first gusts of storm wind rattled the windows, the sea beginning to churn. The storm was coming, for the ship and for us. The storm rolled in at dusk, sudden and violent. The celestial dream groaned under the weight of waves, glass rattling in frames, chandeliers swaying like pendulums. Passengers were advised to stay in their cabins, but the storm outside was nothing compared to the one about to break behind our closed door. A sharp knock echoed through the suite. Alexander and I exchanged a glance. We didn't need to ask who it was. When he opened the door, Clayton stood there with Glenda just behind him. Both looked ravaged, like the sea had already had its way with them. His tuxedo jacket was gone, his shirt wrinkled, hair unkempt. Glenda's makeup streaked, red gown from dinner, now a rumpled shadow of itself. They stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, and suddenly the suite shrank, air thick with salt and rage. "We need to talk," Glenda said flatly. "This has gone far enough," Clayton added, his voice shaking. Alexander shut the door with deliberate calm, his presence filling the space like an anchor. "Has it?" he asked softly. "Because I think it's only just begun." We sat, the four of us facing each other across the living room like adversaries at a negotiation table. The storm outside slammed against the glass, thunder answering thunder. It was almost theatrical, but the tension in the room was too real for drama. Glenda went first. Her lawyer's training slipped through in her tone, controlled, measured, but laced with panic. "Alexander, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but we need to be rational. Think of the children. Think of the families." He cut her off with a voice low and sharp. "Rational? Glenda, you've been lying to me for months. To me, to Rebecca, to Michael, to everyone who trusted you. Where was your rationality then?" She flinched, then rallied. "People make mistakes." I leaned forward, my voice calm but cold. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is booking 2 dinners at once. An affair is not a mistake. It's a series of choices. Lies stacked on lies until the foundation cracks. Every text, every hotel reservation, every smile across the office when you knew exactly what you were doing. Those weren't mistakes, Glenda. Those were decisions." Clayton shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between us. "Evelyn, you're not exactly innocent either. You've been parading around with him, manipulating all of us, playing these games." My gaze snapped to him, steady as a blade. "Games? No, Clayton. I've been responding to your betrayal. There's a difference." "You've had an affair of your own," he spat. "Have I?" I asked, almost gently. "Have Alexander and I lied? Have we hidden? Have we promised fidelity while sneaking around in shadows? We've done everything in plain sight. The only secrecy here belongs to you two." The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the groan of the ship against another wave. Glenda's composure cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Alex, please, I love you. I made a mistake, but it's over now. I'll do anything to fix this." Alexander leaned forward, his hands clasped, eyes burning with something colder than anger. "Will you quit your job so you don't work with Clayton anymore?" She blinked. "What?" "Will you submit to a polygraph? Will you give me access to every device, every account, every message? Will you tell the children yourself why our marriage collapsed? Will you agree to therapy for as long as it takes?" Her mouth opened, then closed, her skin draining of color with each condition. I don't know." "You don't know," he repeated, almost with pity. "You want forgiveness without accountability. That isn't possible." He turned to Clayton, his gaze sharp. "And you? Will you do the same? Quit your job, surrender your accounts, stand in front of everyone we know and admit what you've done?" Clayton's jaw worked, but no words came. Finally, he shook his head. "That's not fair." "Fair?" I rose to my feet, the storm echoing my fury. "Fair would have been honesty. Fair would have been you talking to me when you started feeling restless. Fair would have been counseling before you decided to chase excitement in another woman's arms. Don't talk to me about fair, Clayton. You thought I would never find out. That you could lie to me forever. That isn't fairness. That's cowardice." He slumped in his chair, eyes hollow. For a moment, he looked like the man I once loved, vulnerable, desperate. "I thought it would pass," he whispered. "That it was just a phase. I thought I could have both, stability with you, adventure with her. I didn't think it would cost everything." "That's the truth, then," I said quietly. "Not that I wasn't enough, but that you wanted more than anyone could ever give. You wanted safety and danger. You wanted devotion and thrill. You wanted me invisible so you could see yourself as bigger." He winced, and for once he didn't argue. Glenda reached for Alexander, tears streaking down her face. "Please, I can change. I'll do anything. Don't leave me." He shook his head slowly. "You already left, Glenda. Every night you lied. Every morning you smiled at me while planning your escape. You've been gone for months. I'm just catching up." Her sobs filled the room, jagged and unrestrained. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt strangely empty. Revenge hadn't brought joy, only clarity. I crossed to the window, staring at the storm tossing the ship across the dark sea. Lightning split the horizon, illuminating the four of us in stark relief. Two betrayers, two betrayed. This isn't about punishment anymore, I said softly. It's about choices. You chose lies. We choose truth. That's all. The silence afterward was heavier than any thunder. Finally, Clayton stood, shoulders slumped. Come on, Glenda, he muttered. She looked at him, eyes wide with betrayal of her own. Even in ruin, he was leaving her to gather the pieces. They shuffled to the door, beaten not by our words, but by the weight of their own choices. When the latch clicked behind them, the storm outside seemed to recede just slightly, as if the ship itself exhaled. Alexander sat back heavily, rubbing his face with both hands. God, he whispered, I thought I'd feel satisfied. Do you? I asked, turning from the window. He shook his head. No, just done. Like a chapter has closed. I sank onto the sofa beside him, exhaustion spreading through me. Maybe that's enough. For a while, we sat in silence, the storm still raging, but somehow distant now. Finally, he reached for my hand, fingers tentative but warm. Whatever comes next, Evelyn, it has to be different. No lies, no shadows. I squeezed his hand, meeting his gaze. Agreed. We've seen what lies cost. I won't live that way again. Outside, the storm began to break, clouds thinning, moonlight bleeding through. The sea was still restless, but calmer, as if it, too, had endured the worst of it. Inside, I felt the same. Battered, drained, but strangely clean. Miami's skyline rose sharp and glittering as the celestial dream docked. But for me, it felt less like arrival and more like disembarkation into an entirely different life. The four of us passed each other in the terminal without ceremony, luggage rolling, faces haggard. No more confrontation, no more words left to weaponize, just the silence of endings. Alexander and I walked side by side, our pace matched, the strange intimacy of allies bound by war. When we reached the taxi line, he asked quietly, "Hotel or airport?" "Hotel," I said. I'm not ready to go home yet, not to that house, not alone. The Fontainebleau welcomed us back with the same polished charm, but we were different people than the ones who had checked in days earlier. The suite became a liminal space, a pause before the avalanche of lawyers, paperwork, and explanations that awaited us in New York. We sat on the sofa, luggage unopened, silence pressing between us. Finally, Alexander broke it. "Tomorrow," he said. "I'll call my attorney again. File formally. I can't go back, Evelyn, not after everything." I nodded. Me too. Clayton will fight, I'm sure. He's always cared more about appearances than substance, but I won't let him spin this into something survivable. His hand brushed mine, tentative. "Are you sure you want to do this? Divorce isn't just walking away. It's dismantling a life piece by piece." "I know," I whispered, "but it's already dismantled. We're just sorting through the rubble." The months that followed were a blur of court filings, mediation sessions, and division of assets that once seemed like shared trophies but now felt like bargaining chips. Our house on Willowbrook Lane was the hardest. Every room was a memory. Every corner carried echoes. Clayton fought to keep it, insisted it was ours. In the end, I let him win it. I didn't want a museum of broken promises. I found a loft in Tribeca, smaller but mine. Brick walls, wide windows, no curated decor, just space to breathe. The first night I slept there, mattress on the floor, boxes stacked around me, I felt freer than I had in a decade. There was no one to set the table for, no 6:30 dinner ritual, just me, reclaiming myself. Clayton moved quickly, too quickly. Within 3 months, he was engaged to a paralegal from his office, 26, wide-eyed, smitten. He paraded her at firm functions, as though she were proof that he was still desirable, still victorious. Mutual friends whispered, some with pity, some with judgment. I stopped listening. His choices were no longer mine to carry. Glenda, meanwhile, buried herself in work. She made partner 6 months ahead of schedule, her ambition sharpened by desperation. She moved into a penthouse with sweeping views and hired a nanny for Rebecca and Michael. On the surface, she was thriving. But Alexander told me the children noticed her absences, her distracted phone calls, her brittle cheer. "She's trying to prove she lost nothing," he said one night, "but the kids aren't fooled." His own life had shifted violently, but he anchored himself in fatherhood. Weekend custody became sacred. Saturday soccer games, Sunday brunch, quiet evenings with homework and board games. Sometimes he invited me. At first I hesitated, didn't want to intrude, didn't want to complicate. But Rebecca and Michael surprised me. They didn't treat me like a threat. They treated me like a guest at their table, someone their father smiled more around. Slowly, cautiously, I became part of those weekends. The first time Rebecca asked about me directly, it was over pancakes. "Dad," she said, eyes sharp like her mother's, but voice gentler, "is Evelyn your girlfriend?" Alexander froze, fork suspended. I glanced at him, waiting. He set the fork down and met his daughter's gaze. "She's my friend," he said carefully. "Someone very important to me. We're figuring things out." Rebecca studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, as long as you're happy." She returned to her pancakes, the conversation closed. Relief spread through me, warm and unexpected. Children were resilient, sometimes more than adults. Michael, younger and quieter, said little, but when he hugged me goodbye one Sunday, shy and tentative, I knew I had passed some invisible threshold. For my part, I returned to work. Not marketing full-time, not yet. But consulting projects, freelance campaigns, enough to remind myself that I had skills beyond managing Clayton's life. Clients responded to me, not to the woman behind a successful man, but to me. The validation was sharper than I expected. It stitched together pieces I hadn't realized were torn. Nights were different. Some I spent alone in my loft, relishing the silence. Others I spent with Alexander, dinners that weren't part of a performance, but simply meals between two people learning each other's rhythms. He was thoughtful where Clayton had been flamboyant, steady where Clayton had been restless. Sometimes I caught myself comparing, and then I forced myself to stop. Alexander wasn't the antidote to Clayton. He was his own man, and with him, I was my own woman. There were difficult moments, of course, seeing Clayton in court, smirking with his young fiancée at his side. Hearing Glenda's name whispered at legal functions, her ambition praised as though nothing else mattered. Nights when loneliness pressed too close, when doubt whispered that perhaps I had burned my life for ashes. But then came small moments that steadied me. Rebecca asking me to help her with a school debate. Michael showing me a science project with shy pride. Alexander reaching across a dinner table to squeeze my hand when I laughed at something ordinary. One evening, 6 months after the cruise, Alexander and I sat in a crowded Italian restaurant in the village. Red checkered tablecloth, mismatched chairs, the air thick with garlic and wine. Nothing glamorous, nothing staged. He twirled linguine around his fork and said, almost casually, "Rebecca asked if I was going to marry you." My heart stuttered. "And what did you tell her?" "That if I asked, you might say yes." I stared at him, the din of the restaurant fading. "Was that a hint?" "Maybe." His smile was quiet, unforced. "But no pressure. We've both had enough of rushed promises." I reached across the table, covering his hand with mine. "I don't need promises. Not yet. Just honesty. Just presence." He nodded, eyes steady. "That I can give." Looking back, the cruise felt like a fever dream. Too dramatic, too surreal, but its consequences were real. It ended 2 marriages, shattered illusions, reshaped 4 lives. It also gave birth to something I hadn't expected. Not just vengeance satisfied, but a chance to rebuild on truth. Was it worth it? Some nights I still wonder. But when I wake in the morning, sunlight streaming across my loft, or Alexander's quiet breathing beside me, I know this. Whatever storms I endured, I survived them. And in the wreckage, I found not safety, not perfection, but something far rarer. Freedom. 6 months had passed since the cruise, yet some nights I still woke with the rocking of the ocean in my bones, the memory of chandeliers swaying while secrets shattered. Life on land was steadier, quieter, but no less complicated. Divorce has a way of rearranging not just your home, but your entire sense of self. My loft in Tribeca had finally begun to look lived in. The bare brick walls now carried shelves of books I chose for myself. not to impress colleagues or decorate for clients. A stack of watercolor prints leaned against one corner, waiting to be hung. On the kitchen counter sat a bowl of lemons and a vase of fresh lilies, small luxuries I bought only because I liked them. For years, my purchases had been calibrated to Clayton's tastes, his image. Now, I bought what pleased me. It was astonishing how radical that felt. Alexander visited often, though we hadn't yet blended our households. His apartment near the hospital remained his base, especially on weeks when Rebecca and Michael stayed with him. But we spent more and more evenings together, dinners at noisy neighborhood restaurants, Sunday walks through Central Park, quiet nights in with takeout cartons and laughter spilling between us. It wasn't grand, it wasn't spectacle, it was real. One Friday evening, he arrived with a bottle of wine and 2 boxes of pasta from a little Italian place Rebecca loved. We ate at my kitchen island, music low, the city humming through the windows. Halfway through dinner, he set down his fork and studied me. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked suddenly. "Regret what?" I knew the answer, but I wanted him to say it. The way we did this, the confrontation, the spectacle. Do you ever wish we'd just walked away? I thought about it, swirling wine in my glass. The images came easily. Clayton's pale face at the pool deck, Glenda's cracked composure in the bathroom mirror, the storm outside our cabin. I remembered the pity I'd felt, the exhaustion afterward, the hollowness where triumph should have been. Sometimes, I admitted, but if we hadn't done it, I think I'd still be doubting myself, wondering if I'd imagined it all, if maybe I wasn't enough. Seeing them crumble, that ended the doubt. He nodded slowly. For me too. It wasn't just revenge. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that my instincts weren't wrong. He reached across, brushing my hand, but I don't want to live in that space anymore. Not in anger, not in bitterness. Neither do I said softly. And I meant it. The cruise had been the crucible. What remained now was quieter, more fragile, the work of building something real. Clayton and I finalized our divorce in April. The house was his, along with the curated furniture and the lawn service and the neighbors who whispered behind hedges. I kept my grandmother's necklace, a portion of our savings, and the freedom to choose my future without him. He married the paralegal 2 months later. I saw the photos online, his smile wide but forced, her youth glowing like a shield she didn't know she needed. I felt no jealousy, only pity. Some lessons you can only learn the hard way. Glenda's divorce was messier, drawn out with custody disputes and bitter negotiations, but Alexander held firm. He fought not out of spite, but for his children, making sure their routines remained steady, their futures secured. Rebecca, sharp and ambitious, threw herself into debate team and SAT prep. Michael, gentle and thoughtful, found comfort in science projects and weekend soccer. I became part of their orbit slowly, cautiously. Sunday brunches, museum trips, homework sessions at Alexander's dining table. At first I was Dad's friend. Later, simply Evelyn. The first time Rebecca hugged me goodnight without prompting, my throat tightened. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't victory over Glenda. It was something quieter, something that mattered more, acceptance. One evening in June, Alexander and I took the kids to a small coastal town for the weekend. We stayed in a rented cottage with peeling paint and a porch swing that squeaked. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt like home. On the second night, after the children had gone to bed, we sat on the porch with glasses of iced tea, the air thick with salt. I used to think love was supposed to be a grand performance, I confessed. Big gestures, perfect appearances, curated moments. That's what Clayton wanted. That's what I tried to give him, but it was exhausting. Alexander's hand found mine, steady and warm. And now? Now I think love is just this, sitting on a porch with someone who doesn't need me to be anything but myself. He was quiet for a long time, then said, "I've been thinking about asking you to marry me. Not now, not soon, but someday. I want you to know that." My breath caught. "That doesn't scare me," I said. "Not anymore." We didn't speak of it again that night. We didn't need to. The promise hung between us like the sound of waves, patient and steady. Looking back, the cruise feels like another life. I sometimes wonder who that woman was, the one who plotted revenge with surgical precision, who walked into another man's office with a folder of damning evidence, who stared down her husband in a pool deck standoff. She was me. But she was also someone I had to become to find the woman I am now. Stronger, clearer, no longer invisible. Was it worth it? Worth the pain, the spectacle, the tearing apart of two families? The answer isn't simple. Children were hurt, hearts were broken. Nothing about it was clean. But I know this: betrayal is a fire. You can let it consume you, or you can use it to forge something new. I chose the latter. And on quiet nights, when Alexander's hand rests against mine, when Rebecca's laughter drifts down a hallway, when Michael shows me a project he built with pride in his eyes, I know I didn't just survive the fire. I walked out of it carrying something I never expected. Not revenge, not triumph, but love that feels unadorned, honest, alive. One Sunday morning, months after it all began, Alexander and I sat at a corner table in the same Italian restaurant where he'd first teased about proposals. The place was crowded, noisy, plates clattering, waiters weaving. He lifted his glass of Chianti, smiling at me with a warmth that reached his eyes. "To us," he said. "To us," I echoed, clinking my glass against his. Then, on impulse, I added, "and to Clayton and Glenda." He raised an eyebrow, amused. "To them?" "Yes," I said firmly, "for showing us what we didn't want, for forcing us to see what mattered. Without them, we might never have found this." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "To them," he agreed. We drank, we laughed, and around us life carried on. Ordinary, messy, imperfect. For the first time in years, that felt like enough. Because sometimes the worst thing that happens to you isn't the end. It's the beginning of everything that finally makes sense.